tough economic week ahead. It's the budget speech coming up later this week. Let's get the thoughts then of Joseph Busha, who has powered up because he's using a UPS. He's powered up his crystal ball for us this morning because I'm sure he hasn't got power, but you can order off UPS and solar. Hello to you, Joseph. So just let's start highbrow, shall we? Are we feeling positive or are we feeling negative about the budget speech in a few days' time?
Good morning to the viewers. Certainly, this is one of the most busiest and most anticipated week in the capital markets. This is our budget week on Wednesday, following the mini budget statement that was done in October. So the elephant in the room remains one, which is Eskom, and the rhetoric from the minister might remain the same, unfortunately, in the sense that very little has changed from an Eskom perspective, which has been declared national disaster. And as you mentioned in your intro, we might be getting a new electricity minister. I think this is the first wave of a minister specifically for electricity only. That shows really the gravity of the situation.
And we need to talk about numbers such as inflation and interest rates as well, because as part of that, maybe you can help me understand, Joseph, we've got inflation and interest rates. We know how squeezed everyone is on whatever little money it is that they're earning. And now we heard during the State of the Nation address, there's going to be more grants coming. The ones that we have right now, like the 350 Rand social relief of distress grant, is going to be continuing well into 2024, and there could be even more grants coming in. The problem with that is you have to align them with inflation and interest rates, don't you? Which means it's going to cost taxpayers more money to keep supporting that.
So there are about 25 million that are receiving help from government under the social grants program. And that's quite a lot. 25 million out of about 60 million people in SA are on social grants. And that will put a massive kind of pressure on the fiscus. So we're looking at collecting, or the target for SARS is about 1.68 trillion rand. That has been set by the Minister of Finance. You showed the Konawana. So we need to see how that is going to pan out, given the fact that, we have a lot of pressures, in terms of revenue collection. Given load shedding, companies might collect less. If you collect less, it means less revenue that goes to the fiscus. That means less to spend. So the balancing act is going to be a bit tougher. You mentioned inflation, which has remained stubbornly high at about 6.9. It is down a little bit last week, from 7.2 to 6.9, but still above the target band, upper target band of about 6%. So you kind of moved into a little bit of real interest rates here, given the fact that, the repo is sitting at 7.25, the prime gone up to 10.5%. So there's going to be pressure, in terms of the consumers' prices, in particular food prices have continued to go up. And that is really going to hurt, the households in terms of their pockets. We have the public sector wage strike that might come through there as well. So I think the minister has got quite a tough job to do. Eskom's debt is sitting at about 422 billion. The government debt is 70% of GDP. And all those numbers is what we're going to look at, in terms of how it's going to affect the capital markets and whether, SARB will increase rates again when it makes its next decision, given the pressures in the U.S.
And obviously, with all the pressures globally over the U.S., what's trickling down to us here in South Africa, what do they always say? A butterfly who flaps its wings causes a tsunami somewhere else. And I feel like we are feeling that tsunami. Let's talk SARS for a moment and tax, because you spoke about the tax brackets, Joseph, as well. One of the easiest way for Uncle SARS and the taxman to get some money is to tax those of us who I'm going to call sinners, those of us who enjoy a nice bottle of wine or a bottle of beer every now and then as well. It's an easy tax to go after. Do you see an increase in sin taxes?
That has been the easy way to get cash out, because remember, they can't really squeeze much. right now the minister will have less room to play. He did reduce corporate tax by 1% from 28 to 27. I don't think it's going to have much room in there. So they'll go back to cigarettes, they'll go back to the beers and the spirits where they could increase a little bit of that. We had a little bit of a reduction in terms of fuel levy. I think for a few months last year. That might not work given the fact that the rand has weakened further, and there might be another additional fuel increase later on. So the volatility is quite huge in the rand, which makes it very difficult, I guess, for government to control administered prices and so on. So the thin taxes which has been there will continue to come through, but we also had lots of leakages, in particular in the illicit trading within the tobacco industry, which has been basically hitting the markets. And you see that British American Tobacco, they mentioned that quite a lot in terms of when they released their numbers. So that could be the only solution for the minister, but I think there's very little leg room.
And just as I say goodbye to you, give us one glimmer of hope. Is there anything that you can expect out of this week's budget that's going to make us feel a little bit better? I dare not use the cliche light at the end of the tunnel. Somebody will throw something at me, but let me use it. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Why not? Let's give it a go.
If there is a surprise in terms of revenue collection, that would be certainly a glimmer of hope, in the sense that then the minister have more cash or more armory in his chest. So we hope the Commissioner, Edward Kiswetha, will be able to announce that we pretty close will met the target of 1.68 trillion. That would be good for the markets, capital markets, and hopefully the Reserve Bank might not increase rates by 0.5 basis points, which might be the next expectation.
All right. Joseph, thank you very much, as always. I appreciate your time as well. So not overly optimistic. I don't think many of us would expect overly optimistic expectations ahead of this year's budget. A light at the end of the tunnel. I'm afraid we have to get out of stage 6 load shedding and blackouts before we can start talking about light at the end of the tunnel. My thanks to economist Joseph Busha joining us here on eNCA, looking ahead to the budget speech.